So Ribana will be joining us. Next joining us is the person who actually just asked the question, Fabian Theis. I don't think I need to introduce him much more. You've all seen him, you all know him. And third up on stage joining us, we are very grateful, is Ralf Mikut from KIT, where he heads the research area Automated Image and Data Analysis at the Institute of Automation and Applied Informatics, and he also is the head of the Machine Learning and Time Series in Images group. The panel is not complete because who would I be without my amazing co-host? So Tobias, welcome. Now, we will join or start our panel discussion. You all saw the program title, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the role of data in modern AI. But we want to have this a bit more interactive, so you as the audience have the choice or the opportunity to join and post questions via Slido. You all should have learned how Slido works from voting for yesterday's posters. And while you familiarize yourselves with the app, I think we get started right into the topic. And let me start off. Ribana, thank you so much for the keynote. And you already touched upon some aspects of data. And we already heard this yesterday in the keynote from Michael Bronstein as well. The role of data and the question, are we too model-centric? Are we just all on the hunt for the best model? And should we be more data-centric?
Yeah, so I can definitely say we should be more data-centric, but data-centric from my perspective also includes the model. Because first of all, the model is very often used also to optimize the data. But I think this is the important aspect. So we should think about the model-data combination and not on the data alone and the model alone. But this belongs from my perspective to data-centric, so yes.
Okay, but I thought we live in the era of big data, and at the Helmholtz especially, we're sitting on this huge data treasure, so what's the problem?
I mean, I can maybe sort of comment a bit broader level, right? Of course, when we set up all this, I guess, incubator ideas centrally, and then like this AI platform, right? Sure, we want to leverage the wealth of it, but I guess it might be similar in your case. Still, part of that data might be in part in silos, it might be sort of distributed, it might not always be fully accessible, and then might not be matchable. I mean, this last brief discussion we had, right? Like they say, you have then these different types, like do you even want to put together for us? We have like all these model organisms, we have humans, right? Like do you want to have a model of like whole evolution building these things? So I mean, it depends on the question what you put in, but I think industry is kind of right to push this term of data-centric AI. I think this is really where a lot are moving in. I think it's like this opportunity for us, half of the audience maybe us being Helmholtz, the other half visiting, sort of maybe similar investing in that. So at least in my lab, we've really put in quite a lot of time on the organization. And I really hate to call it data management because it sounds so traditional, but like so just cleaning up. And maybe last point, when we talk to our AI consultants, who I think also quite a few of them here, right? When we initially sort of designed that idea of the teams, there was also this angst that they become fully data-centric and they just need to clean up data for everyone, you know? Because this is like, if a medical partner comes in, have this beautiful data set, can you sprinkle AI on top of it? Typically means 80% cleaning up. So now we ask that the data sets are a bit organized, and I don't know, Marie, if this is always the case, or if you might, Tobias, still need to do a bit of wrangling, right? But I think the more this is sort of standardized and so on, I think the more things will come together. And then I think these foundation models in big parts nowadays, in particular if it's sort of vision-based, the model is clear. I think many of those big sort of image-based foundation models, they are just VITs, so people don't play around with the model all that much. But it's like organizing the data and so on, right?
The thing is, the central problem is the data quality. So as I showed, it will not always help to add more data. And foundation models, I mean, there are not so many researchers looking in the biases and also which data helps. And for example, agriculture, you cannot collect as much data you want, especially not the experimental data. And I would say we should think more about the data quality and not so much giving everything and hope the foundation model and the VIT will do everything, and that's it. And especially if thinking about the adapters and the downstream tasks, there you need to think about the data and the data quality.
But I could imagine, let's say you sort of train this perfect model on cauliflower, and then there's someone coming along with, I mean, I love eating plants a lot, because I eat mostly plants, so I'm sure there's many others that look like cauliflower. I'm coming up with something. Like, you must be able to transfer stuff, right? Which maybe people by default don't do.
Question is what? And
I mean,
which
segmentation of instances sounds like a standard thing, no?
But not for all things, I guess.
No.
For instance, if you look, you want to have a model for dry soil. If you don't have data about it and also have not correlated with precipitation data, you are lost, and model will extrapolate very strange things. Which also means design of experiments might be an old school word, but might be useful also especially for things like you have shown.
There's a related question from the audience. If you had to choose less but clean data or more but noisy data, what would you choose in terms of quality?
So I personally always go for more.
I would tend to do the other.
So we had a study, a power analysis. This is very specific for our setting, this cellular aspects where we measure single-cell transcriptome, and there, you have a fixed budget. Do you want to put it more in sort of sequencing one cell deeper, or do you want to sort of have more cells that tells you sort of variation in population, but much less sort of detail about it? And turns out, depending of course on the question, in this case an experimental design question, differential expression, it's definitely better to go for more. This might depend on the question, but in this case it was the case to have more.
But I mean, we've heard a lot about energy consumption and sustainability, and we know more data means more compute, means more resources. So how do we handle this? Do we balance? Do we just buy better models with more data? And
whatever we have in terms of data size is kind of negligible to the big ones, you think? Maybe not you Earth observation people, well, not you, but there's someone in Karlsruhe, right? But I don't know. I think for sustainability, saying we do small data is a bit of a limiting us, maybe.
At the end, the solution is clear. Train very large model on some data sets and try to retrain these models on more expert data.
Yeah.
Which means you need both.
Yeah.
Exactly, you need to do this only once, that's a good point. I mean, it might not even be us, it might be like to segment anything from meta or whatever, right? And then just go in your smaller one, that's a good point.
I would also disagree, because in the medical domain, you get to higher resolutions with the scanners, or let's say whole slice pathology. The data is huge, and I'm not talking about the amount of individual data samples, but the size of each individual data set.
Huge, yeah.
This can also pose a challenge. We also have another question from the audience that relates to sort of, we've been talking now, we need better data, we need more quality data. So should we still actually invest into developing AI models, or should all of our funding now just go into building data sets?
So my personal opinion is that we are currently hitting a wall with the methods. It doesn't mean that we should stop. What I want to say is a lot of different methods for our applications reach the same accuracy. So it doesn't matter if you have a CNN, a transformer, they reach the same accuracy. So it's not about what is the better model. I think it's better what can you do with the model on top. Is it good for uncertainty quantification? Is it good for explainability? Is it efficient? We need to put it on robots and something like this. So I would say yes, but not with the focus on achieving a higher accuracy, but thinking beyond this.
Do the others agree?
I don't see the contradiction, because we have a lot of data sets that are unstructured here anywhere in the room. And I would suggest that any data specialist get also help from model developers also to make a data set AI ready, because many people from the domain don't know how to do it. And we have very good experience also to talk with this data generating guys looking for make your data set AI ready, publish it, make a data publication. And also we should acknowledge this stuff also for our method developing guys. What's wrong if people have 2 method development paper and 1 paper also generating a data set or helping data people to generate it.
Sure.
I mean, this is right an AI for Science conference, right? So if you were to go to, let's say, in Europe, so ICLE or whatever, right, then it's very clear, sure, most of the papers will be method development, but then there's going to be some sort of special sessions, and in our case, sort of, we have more sort of data type sessions. There's going to be both. I think it's just important, I think, particularly in our field, where we want to really solve a scientific question, that we keep in mind that there is actually a question behind it, and then you sort of need to have the data, and you typically adopt it, and I think that's maybe the most exciting, in my opinion. You actually follow up with an experiment. Let's say, you find that maybe you need more information about these cauliflowers, and you need to add another sensor, or you need to sort of take a second feel. Like this sort of designing a new experiment based on the current model, I think I find super exciting.
But what is then, in your experience, and I mean you all three have gathered experience, the biggest hurdle to making datasets AI ready? Is it just the lack of acknowledgement of fame? Because sort of you get a NeurIPS paper for a new cool model, but you don't get one for the dataset? Or is it just messy business, or is it underappreciated? So what's the challenge we need to address?
I mean, NeurIPS has a data track session now, so they explicitly have a way to acknowledge sufficiently big data sets. So I think a few of you might have been doing that. My lab has from time to time contributed with the consortium to some of this. This is actually also a good idea where you can involve companies a lot, because companies want, like producing a big data set is something that, particularly if they have a specific sensor, can do, and you wrap a challenge around that. So I think there's nowadays really means how to sort of become known for these and get acknowledged, and I think for us, of course, on the modeling side, this is super useful. So I think these things are happening.
I would even guess data owners that don't want to share the data. Because if you talk with industry, in the data is a lot of hidden knowledge about know-how, and they don't want to share it. And the second point is also, even in a scientific community, is always the aspect, okay, if I exploit my data set for the next 2 or 3 years, other people need time to come on the same state, and I can write 2 or 3 nature papers or science papers out of it, and later I share a small part and the most uninteresting part of the data, because I have shared the data, but nobody can use it. This mindset is still
difficult to read Excel table or something that people can't load.
So as we speak of industry data and other data that is non-public, is it ethical to use such non-public data to train a model and then make the model publicly available? Is that ethical?
So my gut feeling would be I would not do this, but I'm having trouble in finding a reason for this, because I know how hard it is to get data, and I would not do this. It feels wrong to taking the effort from others and use it for my own fame. So that's what I would say. But I don't know. I think it's about the effort of the collecting the data and just taking it. It doesn't feel right.
But was the ethical aspect with respect to sort of publishing it, or because of not disclosing what it has been trained on?
I think it is sort of the gap between the data not being published, but you publish something on something that is not publicly available.
Yeah.
It's also a question of reproducibility, right? So who
That
can...
might be hard to test, right? But nowadays, so many of these things are so not reproducible anyway, because like who has a compute power to redo like a big GPT, whatever, right? But I think having the model publicly available for others to use in an open source fashion, I think that could be an advantage, even though you don't have the source data set. So I think it would be useful, right?
Especially if other people have similar data sets and can run models on their own data. It's also a kind of reproducibility.
I mean, Llama, for example, right? They don't share what they've been training on, I believe. They just share the weights, right? Yeah. So it's a common practice anyway. I mean, I think you can discuss if it's super ethical, but it's like not the scientific method to be everything will be useful. That's true.
But I mean, if we assume now we live in a perfect world and we make all our data sets publicly available and sort of we can train all the models on it, do we not run into a problem of validating? I mean, this problem has been raised for large language models and training on the entire internet, and for language this might be fine, but for scientific applications, so should we go and push the limits of sharing is caring? Or is there some aspect into hide your data?
The question is when do you want to push it? Because, for example, for a lot of PhD students in agronomy, their PhD thesis is the data, and but we say they need to publish it at the end at their PhD. For example, I think that's totally fine, and there we should push more. But forcing them doing it in the beginning, I don't see how this is doable. How we can yeah.
Yeah, I was more hinting at sort of, in the long term, if all the data is publicly available, how do we know that we actually have abstraction capabilities in the models? How do we validate?
Do you think that data generation will stop? Because I think the experience is generate a data set, train a model, then publish a model, and then always new data coming in. For instance, if you look on the energy system is even changing. You get concept drift in the data, and if the model is able to handle it, it's a good sign. But the best validation data set is, or the best test data set is a data set that you don't have or it's not possible to have at the time of model development.
Yeah, I agree, right? Like the typical standard sort of method paper we do is we have some data that has been sort of retrospectively been done. We split it up, sort of train on that, sort of validate on that, right? But of course there, could potentially slip in if you sort of take some other embedding that has looked at the data before. So, and this would not be the case if you make a prediction and follow up experimentally. And that could be like an angle that we could particularly play because we have our experimental partners close by, right? I mean, I guess you must have in your excellence initiative these type of people to interact with, and then, hey, could you sort of go to that field, or I don't know, just get this more data.
Yep.
Is active learning, because that's something what you say, right? This search, is that something you can do with the robots, like sort of look with
we do this, yeah. It's also active perception. So I didn't show in the glasshouse. We see where we should collect the next data to get a better model. Active learning we tried. So yeah, that's a thing.
I can imagine for robots particularly.
Yeah, that's a hot topic still. But the problem with active learning is always the random baseline is so good. So, yeah.
But we had a question here in the Q&A related to this. At least us as Helmholtz, should we make all of our data sets publicly available? Is this our role as Helmholtz researchers? Because we have access to these large infrastructures.
I would say most, because we have one example also discussed in our institute. We have some data for topology of energy system, which also describe critical infrastructure. And if all models, all data are public, it might be even a security risk because attacker have the perfect data set to improve also the attacks. Most, I would agree. All, I say no for this reason.
I mean, there's personal data, right? Obviously, patient data and so on that you can't make available. There's managed access. But I think NIH and I think NSF in general has had that practice for quite some time. Public-funded research needs to sort of make data public at a certain even sort of fixed time point. And I kind of like these ideas they put forward, and I've been in various sort of committees trying to advocate this more, that let's say we have a DFG-funded project, a Helmholtz AI project, there we typically don't generate so much data, but let's say in a DFG project so happens that, after a certain time point, there's like a deadline when the data needs to be public. Because, otherwise you can say, yeah, we're still not done, and so on, and you sort of push it out. I mean, this is taxpayers' money in the end, right? So, I mean, sure, if you're a company, I mean, that's maybe your data mode that you use sort of to defend against other companies. But I think with public thing, if there's no legal reasons or sort of privacy reasons or whatever, I would really advocate for that. I think that would help the ecosystem.
I mean, maybe it's an option. Also, what we do is when I work together with companies and they cannot, it's ongoing research, like they test some chemicals in the field. We publish just saying, okay, this is substance A, B, C. So not naming it, but giving out the data, but just
pseudonymized.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that for obvious reasons you have to do in the medical domain anyways, right?
Yeah.
That you have to confound. You cannot say this is the following group of people.
Wow.
I think the drug part is a bit tough, right? Let's say if you were a farmer and you just call it drug X, but then you see sort of the effect and everything, so I think they won't be able to share that. I mean, this is like really long-term business and so risky, so I think that aspect, but they're companies, but for public stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we also have the problem with when we want to analyze management strategies, for example, glyphosate. So we collect data, but nobody wants to give us the data because they are afraid that we publish it. So that's a back and forth all the time. It's yeah, we still have no solution for this. How to deal with this kind of survey data, where farmers are afraid they get in a bad reputation.
May I ask the audience briefly?
Go ahead. I mean, I honestly thought about the same situation right now. It's like, what does the audience feel?
Because I was wondering about the data sharing. Like what I still see in many labs, mine unfortunately part included, is that we sort of make one data set, one project, maybe like a method or something, and then one paper, and then sort of potentially move on. And sometimes we now retrain with let's say, foundational representation of that, but it's not that we always really use also old data and have it so organized. So is there maybe experience of people doing otherwise? Is there maybe someone like who has a very well set up data management in his lab already? You got the data management set up? Yes. Is there one only?
Congratulations.
Okay, then counter question. Who would like the data management to be set up?
But maybe you could share briefly or so. Is that okay?
It is.
And if I may, how many of you are experimentalists who have run experiments in the lab?
Fair enough.
All right. So that's actually one of my questions in the question board. Essentially, there seems to be a divide. I just came back from an experimentalist conference, and there seems to be a big divide between the AI community who do not communicate enough with experimentalists and the experimentalists who do not communicate enough with the AI community. And I know there are efforts to collaborate, but there are ways, like fair data, I'm sure all of you have heard of it, that can automate that process and use information technologies in the current infrastructures to actually let machines decide how these two domains interact. And that could be a new pathway forward. So going back to the data management, we had a project with the HMC, the Helmholtz metadata collaboration. And yeah, we developed some systems and we published them. And yeah, if you have any specific questions, I can say more, but yeah, I've taken the microphone long enough.
Appreciate it, thanks.
Thank you. And I would follow up on this one also to the panel, or if there's experience from the audience. We obviously need people who can sort of collect data, but then also curate it. So what does this mean for training and education of the next generation of data scientists? Because we've heard yesterday from Jan Hesthaven and also throughout the talks today, education and teaching are important aspects. So what do we need to do? Or what does this mean, this aspect of data management?
I mean, what we started doing do you want to go ahead first?
No.
I just want to say, like in health, but I think sort of in general, so we've been setting up what's called this Munich School for Data Science. So we have a few aspects. We have health, but then we have also robotics, earth and environment, and so on. And there, what we realized is that this sort of the shared language of data science across those domains was really a useful thing. So we have some courses that like distributes that information and shares it. And I think that's been like a really useful exercise. So I think this definition of what a data scientist is, namely that there's sort of AI and sort of compute expertise, but then also domain expertise, right? So that you intersect between these. That's why this language gap, I don't think it's going to be, it's not much of an issue anymore, to be honest. I mean, some aspects for sure is, but I think this is sort of really vanishing. But still, people obviously have different hats, and you need to sort of put them in the middle. But I think this education is very clear. I think every medical a student that's grown up into a researcher is now sort of learning some of the other aspect, and it must be in your fields as well, that data science is a core curriculum part now, right?
It's not, that's a problem. I think, so I work a lot with students coming from crop sciences, and their knowledge about programming is excellent. That's still the case. And I mean, the problem is they don't know what they can all do with the data, and they don't even know how to prepare it so that others can use it. It's in both directions. So our next step is clearly that every student working with data needs some basic knowledge how to analyze it. That's clear, and that's not set up yet. Then that's necessary.
So is there grad school in your excellence initiative towards that?
Yes. Yes, we have it, but I would even start in a bachelor. Yeah, I think the grad school, they're fine. They know how to work with different disciplines, but the students, the bachelor students, master students, we need to start there.
But data.
Sorry. Best way would be if it's in the lectures also to the bachelor time, and not from us as a separate lecture, but from people teaching the field. Yeah. How to organize the data, what is good practice, yes. Yep. What it means for an ontology in the topic, yeah. And also that if the people go to a lab, see a kind of electronic lab book or a structured data management, which is pre-structures and where their own things go in. And if we are on this state, I think we win. Otherwise, we get this individual formats and binary files and missing metadata or things in 5 or 6 different files or even on paper notes. We will lose for AI readiness if it's in this state.
This was exactly my point. Yep. Analyzing is one thing, but then we are again sort of towards the model, right? Before you can analyze or put it into a model, we need to curate it, right? And we have a question from the audience to this as well. So how do we make sure that model developers and users are knowledgeable about the data quality and reusability, especially in times where many data sets are being made open? So this also ties into this, how do we bring this knowledge to those who are working on it?
And it's a fair enough point that's being raised here, right? Let's say the more you make these data competitions, these Kaggle challenges or whatever, which I think is really fun. I think it's a fantastic exercise for students, right? But of course, you kind of abstract things away so that at some point, this particular sample is just a data dot in a high-dimensional vector space and people don't know much about it. And if it's sort of, if there's some uncertainty attached or some issue with the particular data set, often this could get lost. So I think that's just how it is. But I think as soon as they want to then potentially write a paper or sort of come up with a research question that goes beyond the purely methodological one, you need to then sort of start interpreting it, and then, you know, I think you would be able to, you would need to basically intersect with the experimental partners then along these lines, or then, I don't know, write to the original authors or read up on it or something like that. So I think then, I mean, building this into metadata, I find this could be potentially possible, but I think in general might not be always possible. Might be a way to scale, I guess. Yeah.
And I don't see it as a linear process. Also, to your question back, I don't see that data collection first and then closing the data set and developing the model. It's for me more a closed loop process, applying a very simple version of the model, look for outlier, look for wrong labels, look for missing data, because this can make this process so much faster. That you gain a lot of starting quite early with model development.
Yeah, that's what I meant in the beginning. You should always think this together and with feedback loop, and we should not stop with, okay, we have a result done, paper, finished, next step. Yeah, I think that's not the whole story, especially when you think about deployment and getting new data, and so you need to keep everything in the loop.
I mean, one aspect that could be maybe interesting to discuss is if there's such a data ecosystem happening, it could be like in your clusters or around these crop sciences, and I'm sure there's going to be industrial aspects to it, but I think it sometimes happens in a few places is that there's actually also a startup world sort of companies that then not just make those discoveries that we typically make, but then sort of make the engineering efforts to turn them into solutions and then sort of let them bottom up been happening. I don't know if this is something that you guys plan already on that level, or is something that we also could potentially more enable. I'm not sure if it's this Helmholtz AI core topic, but I think at some point we're going to be asked by the politicians in terms of shorter money, like why do we but why can we organize a conference with 400 people about a topic that we might not yet build a company of? So what are we worth? And I think if we have then some startups or so to show, or some industry collaborations, that there's actually a transfer back to society that's maybe more than a paper that, we typically do, right? I think that would be really valuable. Do you see that happening in your case?
I mean, the reading robot was from a startup.
Right, it was not yours, okay.
No,
Awesome,
they started in Finorob, and then they had a startup. So a lot of work that I showed here that already the work went into startups, especially with the robots. We have some, and they're good initiatives that they can, you have a host institution as a university, and then you build your startup there, and then you grow, and then you go away after a few years. I think that's nice. You're close to the research, but still you think about the deployment, and there are good ways to do this.
That's excellent.
So
That's the way to go.
The point that Ralf made about the people who actually collect the data. Now, we've recently had a discussion also at HAICON about this, where they said, we go out in the field, we observe, we gather data, but we just don't want to feed this into some anonymous machinery where others just do the analysis, right? We want the feedback. Yeah, and this cycle where it's sort of the loop is closed, where you also tell people, okay, please go there the uncertainty is highest. This actually helps both sides. Yeah? So this is an observation we also recently had.
Or show visualizations of data and point to some points, or show groupings, cluster.
Or do it automatically, like you have your uncertainty quantification, this is where it's highest, design your next experiment, have your robot move there, or I don't know, whatever you guys measure that.
Your plant terminator.
Yeah, I mean, very often it's enough to just to tell there's something wrong. Can you go there and have a look?
Yep.
That's most of the time only what they want. It's not 90% accuracy. This berry has a spot. It's look there, go there, and this is fine.
So anomaly detection mostly is that?
Yeah, this for example. It's just red and green, and you want to know where to go and where not. That's what they want.
Okay, to take this a bit to the next topic, we have another question from the audience that is very high voted. For those of you who haven't noticed, you can vote for them. When it comes to AI, which application domain in general, or which niche specific application is, in your opinion, underexplored and might be exciting? So where do we actually have a data treasure that we have not leveraged yet? Because I think we saw yesterday biology with AlphaFold, that sort of went full. I personally know in 2022 weather was more or less solved, so that's the current hype. But where should we look?
From an application point of view, or from a methods?
No, from an application. Where do we have the data, or where do we not have, and what do we do to collect it?
I mean, I can say from agriculture point of view, the combination between genotype and phenotype is still not clear. So how does the environment influence or combine with the genotype? How do they combine such that we know what the plant will look like? That's not clear, or the root and the shoot, and there are so many open questions. That's not clear yet.
So there would be a collaboration between, let's say, the biology part and more the fundamental, even down to a molecular or genetic level, to environment. So does it not lie within, in Helmholtz terms, a research field? So do we need to go cross?
So the problem is that you need so many disciplines. That was our problem. We will start in the phase 2 with it, but the problem is having all scales at one place. We already have more than 100 researchers, so how many more do you need to build up the whole pipeline, to have knowledge on each of these aspects? It's not about interdisciplinary work, 2 disciplines. We already talk about 3 and more disciplines, and we even have included philosophers, and there's so many disciplines you would need. There I see the problem. So bringing the data together, how? Where?
I mean, I think it's a holy grail in life sciences in general and in health, of course, in specific, this GXE, right? So gene plus environment, how it determines the phenotype. It's like, I think, not solved for sure. It's like, I think, one of the key questions in computational biology and beyond, right? I think like a lower hanging thing that could be potentially attacked is not happening is that sequencing has been so massively getting cheap that genetic quantification is just doesn't cost a thing versus many of the other things, even whole genome sequencing, right? So this you can be doing for all your crops, this can be done for every one of us, and you know, if sort of politics at some point sort of deals with the security and sort of that we want to share, every doctor will have our genome around, right? And then, of course, it might be like, do we want to know what type of, sort of particular diseases we can get, in particular half of our kids will get? That's maybe a bit of a more challenging thing. But that's a data set that will be there rather soon because it's just not expensive. And once you have it, it's not going to change, right? So you can do this at birth and you have that. So putting that into many everyday life decision making, I think could be interesting. Like, you know, should you take that medication or that? Should you adapt it? Should you be precision, personalized, and so on? I mean, I formulate this now for human, right? But I guess you can do the same thing for your crop, or I don't know, you can do some population models even for other cases where you take that information.
Yeah, I don't think it only applies to life sciences because the paradigm would also be energy and
everywhere,
weather and environment, right? But sort of what's stopping us that we cannot? Is it just we don't have the data? How and where?
I think you need someone. I do this now, saying I do this now, and I have 5 PhDs, maybe 10, who knows? And I do this now. I think that's the.
I mean, the effects are subtle. So I mean, there's a reason why this hasn't been done yet. I mean, these genome-wide association studies, right? And they do old school stuff method-wise, and they still ask for more samples. So maybe at some point there's like the end number is just not going to be feasible. So it could be that it's just not solvable, right?
Maybe then
but
even worse.
Fabian, DNA and RNA-seq might be cheap, but is it also correlating with metabolism, for instance, with imaging data, also with simple cardiograms, even movement data from smartwatches? Did you see an initiative in this direction, really correlate all these things together?
This is also a Helmholtz topic, just advertise. You might have heard about the national cohort. It's been a plus and a bit of a sometimes critical thing, but you know, some of these data sets are actually being acquired, right? And there's some very interesting ones in DZNA, for example, they have their own Rhineland study and so on, I guess also close by, and some others. So I think it's beautiful what type of data is being aggregated at the moment, of course, beyond UK Biobank and so on as well. So I think people will have this more and more, and there's businesses also starting around this, right? With these watches, for example, you know, that's astonishing.
Do we need the million cohort with cheap data?
Yeah, so.
But I mean, sort of, if I go and look, I find in the data sets linked on the internet, and there's so many initiatives on sort of databases where I can look for different data sets. So it's there still. I know I'm being the devil's advocate, but why do we need someone, and what does this person need to do?
I mean, for us, we don't have a database where we search for data. I mean, think about images, point clouds, hyperstructured data. We do not have this yet. We cannot just search. That's our problem.
Okay.
But maybe
So from Earth and environment, one discussion that we are having is whether there is a chance to do AI on long-term ecosystem change. You have databases like GBIF and ELTER, and there may be treasures sitting in there. Well, there may be challenges like, well, it's gappy data, it's just point data, and there's a lot of context information missing, and the time scales are long. But that might actually be a field where this could also be applied, and has not been applied so far.
I think it's a fair point, right? This rediscovery in, like with maybe more modern technique in this longitudinal aspects, some type of imputation and so on. And I do think accessibility is an issue. Like, I mean, I was mentioning ARCO or others, but like just getting access, like on a bigger set is really complicated. Denmark, you know, they have been sort of logging their patient with IDs or their population with IDs since like 50 years. But getting into that system and actually accessing that is hugely complicated and with all kind of legal constraints. So the data sharing, particularly with this sort of sensitive data, is not as straightforward, but I think should be more automated. It's just discussed.
Question for from the audience that maybe goes in a different direction. So with all the AI and all the data, Where are the new theories? Do we run the same risk as everyone else? We just get more data, but it does not lead to better understanding?
Of course. I think, why are we doing what we're doing? Do we want to find this lucky, small, simple equation that beautifully tells the truth of what my system does? It doesn't even exist. Like if I sort of have this black box thing that behaves like my real whatever I want to model, under all the perturbations I can put on top, like have I understood the system then? I mean, I can use it as a simulation device, so maybe that's it. It's not the physics approach, but I think it's philosophically really hard. Like if you can generate any experiment that you can invalidate afterwards, maybe you're done. You might not understand it, but...
I hope on the curiosity of the scientists, not being happy with one neural network magically doing all things, but also trying to reinterpret, playing with inputs, using explainable AI to understand what the system has learned. And we will definitely need it if we try to extrapolate.
Yeah. I mean, what I think is interesting, or for me, 2 points. One is the understanding, and the other is to automate things. Like if you have, the perfect neural network that does what you want, use it, of course. But I think it's also explainable machine learning. You can use it to find out new things. For example, we measure things in the field, but we don't know yet if this is the best thing what we do. We think that we should measure hyperspectral data to learn about diseases and plants. Might be correct, might be wrong. Maybe there's something better. We don't know yet. So I think machine learning can help us also to identify and set up these systems that we can automate later. And there, I think it gets interesting.
I mean, all the world is talking about AGI now, right? And there's some big labs that think that whatever we do in our fields is going to be solved by this general model that sort of eats it up all. But I think there it's very clear that people really don't understand much about them. So I think then reanalysis of these models. Or I think yesterday in Michael's keynote, right? So this one point he made is that sort of people start now training on the weights as ensembles, so trying to see what structure is there. I think that's a fascinating area. So I think this, either like these sparse autoencoders, what's happening at the moment, or just sort of trying to understand and interpret these models more, I think will come more and more. In medical discipline, they want this anyway, right? Otherwise you can't get it through the authorities. And I think maybe also in Earth and environment and so on, if you really want to sort of convince politicians on that, right? You might sort of get it from your black box model, but at some point you need to have something maybe simpler too. So I think this thing with the black box, at some point you want to have explanation. I totally get it.
Okay, then maybe as the last question from the audience, and to close the loop to the beginning again, in the current state of data in AI for science, what is the good, what is the bad, and what is the ugly? So maybe we have 3 panelists and we have 3 things. Fabian, what is the good?
Yeah, I like that. So for me, the good is, when we did that conference 5 years ago, it was maybe like a quarter of all of you, and we had some very specific things, and we sort of saw a bit links, right? I mean, we got to know each other, and like, I don't know, I think I would have talked about agricultural robots by the time, but I think we really start seeing that there's cross-pollination, not just from the methods on individual fields, but also across the fields, how someone uses it. And you said in your talk, Ribana, right? You said, hey, you check what medical discipline is doing with images, and you sort of copy. I take what computer vision does, or what you guys do with the simulation-based part, for example, is something that I think will become a big thing for us. I mean, Ralf, you said we need to extrapolate. So I think the good for me is that it's such an interdisciplinary field. You need to have big teams nowadays to make really impactful papers, and I think we have the community and I think also the dynamics for doing that. Okay, then a bit unfair maybe, but I know you can answer the last one. So Ralf, what is the bad?
There's no bad data.
There is no bad data. Wow, and then Ribana.
I would actually said the same even with the ugly one. I mean, the whole world is ugly when it comes to data science, right? You would, I always have, it was from years of Yeah, I always tell my students that, yeah, the real data is ugly, but you need to work with it to learn about it. But it's still valuable. It's nothing bad about it. But we need to get our hands dirty with this kind of data, and not only the nice experimented data. We need all the data together.
So next year we will call the panel the good, the bad, and the valuable. And with this, I think we come to a close. Thank you for the discussion. But I'm sorry we could not ask all the questions that were here from the audience. Thank you for participating. But you will have a chance to ask these questions. I'm hoping tonight at the social dinner. And this brings me also to a very good point, the social dinner tonight. We will be at the Wildparkstadion, the home of the KSC. And before we move on to the next point in the agenda, one very important thing. There will be buses transporting you from here to there, so from Messe to the stadium. For this, gather at 6 p.m. downstairs. There will be the buses, and they will go when they are full. Don't worry, there are enough buses. And also for those of you who will have to come back here, starting from 8 p.m. on, every hour there will be a bus from KSC going back here, stopping by Durlacher Tor and Hauptbahnhof, so you will have transportation back. That being said, the Wildparkstadion is in a very nice location in north of the castle, and it's actually quite a nice walk also to the city downtown. It will stay light during the day in June quite well, so you can also enjoy a nice walk. With this, we close the panel. Thanks to our panelists, and thank you for participating. And with this,